All right, welcome to another episode of Not Investment Advice. We got our man Jack Butcher in the place, king of the metaverse right now. What's happening, man?
Hey, mate, how are you? Good to be here, boys.
We're going to talk about your Bored Ape taking over a little bit later in the show, but you've been keeping us up to date with all the craziness going on there. We got Trung Phan, writer at The Hustle, regular on CNBC, best friends Elon Musk on Twitter anyway. Also, dude, before we actually do the official one, you're about to hit or already hit 100,000 followers, right? Did that happen yet?
I know this is going to come out sometime next week. If I'm not at 100,000 by then, I'm an embarrassment. I'm a total embarrassment.
You're quitting Twitter.
Yeah,
anyway.
I'm at 99.3 right now. I'm not even keeping track, to be honest. It's irrelevant. It's not a milestone that I bought a cake from Dairy Queen that I'm going to eat when it hits. I didn't go to Dairy Queen and ask them to make a custom cake with 100K on it.
What? You just got just Trunk's face on it on CNBC with his sleeveless hoodie on it? Wait,
hold on. Before we get into to more meaty stuff, I wanted to say we're calling Jack the king of the metaverse and his Bored Ape calls. So any listeners here that have purchased any Bored Apes, and we told you not to do anything based on what you hear on this podcast, okay? So I was hitting Jack. I'm like, how serious should we lean into the fact that you called Bored Ape? He's like, listen, if you take credit on the way up, you're going to have to take credit on the way down.
Yeah. So a preview for what we got coming today.
Not
anyway.
Investment advice, not investment
You did not hear about Bored Ape on the Not Investment Advice podcast.
So look, we're gonna talk about Cuban later today. Mark Cuban had this crazy blog post about DeFi, yield farming, liquidity providing, all this crazy stuff that most of us don't really fully understand. So we're going to cover that. We're going to talk about Bored Apes and what's going on, the crazy stuff in DeFi world and crypto overall. But before we get onto that, we're going to talk a little bit about what's going on in the convergence in the investing world and media. So there's a couple big stories that came out this week. One was Harry Stebbings, 20-minute VC dude, podcaster, also from the UK, just announced like $150 or $160 million venture fund.
140, I think.
140, yeah. All right. And then A16Z, the leading VC fund, have just said, or Andreessen Horowitz, they have officially become a content publisher. So why don't we just kick off with that, boys? Like, what you guys are like sitting at the edge of both of these things. I know, Jack, you're investing as well in startups nowadays. You're like one of the people a lot of people look at in the creator space as an individual who's kind of built an audience and done that. And then Trung, on your side, you've been killing it as much as anyone in building up your brand and your name on Twitter, especially. And maybe one day you might have a fund as well or something like that. So I'm curious, like, how are you guys seeing what's going on in that space?
Jack, go nuts, buddy.
All right. So I have to admit, Harry Stebbings I haven't watched a single Harry Stebbings YouTube video, and I don't understand how I never heard his name before. So forgive my
that's all right,
ignorance on that story, but fair play to him. But I listened to the Jake Paul, My First Million. I'm about halfway through that, and at a high level, it does feel like this unstoppable shift, right? When individuals have the amount of leverage that they have now, they are media entities unto themselves. And I think reading reading the Andreessen Future, right? That's what it's called. Reading the homepage of that when it launched, it's basically every founder of every portfolio company they have writing a story about why their business is going to be the future of X, right? Which, fair play, that's everybody talks their own book, but it's just an interesting, there's this interesting tension between the critique of traditional media and the incentives behind it. And then that basically the same human incentives start to inform any media company, even if people imagine that they aren't biased or they aren't reporting something that is advantageous to them in the long term.
Everybody has a constituency. Like the New York Times has moved to the left because their subscriber base is frankly more to the left, right? So they're catering to that constituency. They also have powerful backers in politics, in business. So yeah, everybody, Jack, you're right. Everybody talks their own book, right? And
apart from us, because this is not investment advice.
Well, what's funny is we talk our own book, but we tell people we're talking about it. We tell them not to invest in it.
We're honest about it, at least. Yeah.
Well, I just want to add the last point on before I cut Jack off. There was, everybody has, of course, these founders are going to be talking positively about their companies and their vision of the future. But I mean, that's the point, is that they're not getting that coverage from the mainstream media. So they're like, listen, we're just going to put this out here. And frankly, anybody that really cares enough to look into these things should be like, okay, here's one side of it. Here's the other side, right? You're an idiot if you're only looking at one side. And this is actually why I started. I mean, I used to tell people, like, I go to Drudge Report and Fox News, like maybe a couple times a week, right? And Breitbart. I just want to know how the other side sees, not even that I'm necessarily, left or progressive or super progressive or liberal, but like I definitely lean that way. I just want to know what's going on over there, man. Like, and obviously I'll go there and be like, yo, there's some crazy shit going on here. But when they go to, when right wing leaning people go to left wing outlets, they're just saying the same shit, right? They're like, this shit's fucking crazy. So I think Andreessen, the takeaway for me is, and this is not to compare either to left or right, it's just that there's always multiple sides to the story, right? And if any individual that cares enough to opine on these things, listen, if you care enough to have an opinion, you should look at every angle. I can't remember who said it. It might have been Christopher Hitchens, but like you can't be an expert in something unless you can argue the other side perfectly, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, completely.
Yeah, I think it's just it's just thinking about what constitutes media. Like that whole definition has changed. Like press is, this is a Balaji idea. The idea of reporting a story, it requires a villain or like there are certain constructs.
It's a narrative
that are prevalent in traditional media that may not be prevalent in what we're seeing now, which is more of like an announcement versus a story, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know, the argument that distribution is just ridiculously, like a ridiculous advantage, and it's taken this long for people who are immersed in this every day to realize it. Like the Jake Paul comment on My First Million, where he's like, 2 million listeners, that's like a cute niche audience.
Yeah.
You mean Jake Paul said that to them, right?
Yeah. Which is just like a fascinating realization. And he's got an angel list rolling fund now.
Yeah, I actually,
a year.
I'll give a little bit more color on that, because I actually interviewed him also for The Hustle before they did My First Million. So his angel investing partner is Geoffrey Wu, also a founder, Stanford graduate, does a human wellness startup, HVMN, very like entrepreneurial, and he's like kind of the operations, background investing space guy to Jake's just massive distribution.
Mm-hmm.
And no, exactly right. During when I chat with him, he just threw the numbers out there, insane. Like the eyeballs this guy has, and whatever you think about him, that's almost irrelevant. And he's like, because he has these eyeballs, he has this super fervent fan base. And he was saying something so interesting. I asked him, okay, you have this huge fan base. How do you direct them towards these startups that you're going to invest in, right? Because they're called the anti-fund, and their strategy is actually a bit different than most venture funds. They are rolling fund, first of all. But the other thing is they want to make concentrated bets where they have a pretty high ownership instead of doing a spray and pray. So they're not looking for like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5% in companies. They're like, listen, we'll find companies that we believe in, that we can add value, and we want 10, 20, 30%, right? And I asked him, like, how will you direct people towards those things? And he actually said, Jack, what you alluded to. He's talking about narrative. He's like, listen, if you look at my Twitter feed and like how I prepare my audience for these fights I have, because he's into boxing just like his brother Logan. He's like, I'm creating like these narrative arcs, right? Like I'm bringing my audience along on these journeys with me. And like, I think I will be applying those same things to any company I invest in, because that will get people engaged and excited and make them even potentially become customers or even investors if they want, because it's a rolling fund, right? So, no view into whether or not that'll actually work, but I think it really ties into Bilal's initial questions, right? The marriage between content commerce going into investing.
Well, Trung, I was going to say, as you're explaining that, remember we had this conversation months ago about the heel character.
Yeah.
Like when you listen to someone like Jake Paul out of character, it's kind of a fascinating experience, right? Because people assume, or I at least assumed, I wouldn't label everyone to this, as like the Jake Paul you see ringside at the Logan Paul fight is like what he's doing all day long. It's like, that's not him, right? He's just exceptionally
playing the character,
exceptionally good performer, right? And that to me is like this fascinating separation between he can move a crowd in a certain direction, and that might be completely different from the type of people that are investing in the fund, right? It's like this person who wants to make an investment in Jake Paul's fund understands his ability to direct.
It's like
in a direction.
It'd be like if
attention.
you were if you let's say that you were an individual that want an LP, a limited partner, which means an individual that gives money to these funds, and that you want to direct investments toward, green investments, climate change fighting investments, you'd find an expert in that field, right? Jake is an expert in directing attention. So if you are a consumer interested investor or want to be involved in someone that can, move millions, it's like you said, right? 2 million, the illusion you had where he goes and talks to the My First Million podcaster, Sam and Sean. It's like, 2 million, that's a really cute little audience you have, right?
I'm just going to add as well, because I think the kind of macro thing here is like the empowerment of the individual, the leverage that they have now versus 10, 15, 20 years ago. And I tweeted about this a few days ago, which was something along the lines of, people who have an audience are now realizing that they don't just need to read an ad for another company. They want ownership of that company. And especially when you're big enough, you're able to say, all right, not only do we want to just promote this product, I want to collaborate and make this product with you, or I want to come and invest in it or whatever. So I think that's one big thing.
The two big examples is LeBron with Blaze Pizza. He's like, I'm out at McDonald's. Yeah. Why don't I just get equity stake in a fast rising, fast casual, healthy type of pizza? Or you go back, right, to the OG, 50 Cent and vitamin water. That's like the OG example.
That's OG, which is a good example. But then there's all the new ones too, which are like YouTubers, even like Nelk boys. We've talked about this in the DMs. If you don't know who the Nelk boys are, they're kind of like I don't know how to describe them. They're like a bunch of frat bros.
Jackass. They're like YouTube jackass.
Yeah, and to be fair, their videos are incredibly made. The production quality is really crazy. They're kind of no hold bars, like say anything, do crazy stuff, pranking people. They got millions of followers, and they've just launched
to make all their money from merch actually and other avenues because they're demonetized.
Exactly. But they just launched the seltzer company, a spiked seltzer company, and they have crushed it. Like from what I can see, they're absolutely crushing it. Like there were people like thousands of people turning up for their
like that.
Yeah, the energy is crazy, and they're kind of annoying in some ways. Like they're kind of like dicks, but like they're really talented. I'll give them credit for what they're doing. And then of course you got the Logan Paul and the brothers there, what they're doing in like boxing, which is crazy, right? Because would you say 10 years ago, two YouTubers are going to fight and make millions, and then fast forward a few more years, one of those is going to fight the greatest fighter of all time, arguably. And this is just a crazy kind of world we're living in. So I think that's a good example. And then the last thing on Harry specifically, I will say, because he's really young, man. He's like 24, 25 years old, I think.
It's insane.
He started a podcast in his mum's kitchen, and we started pretty much the same time. We've spoken and met a few times.
Oh, you met Harry?
Yeah, I met him. We got introduced because someone I interviewed was doing something with him as well, and he just introduced us and spoken a little bit, but not like, I wouldn't say we're friends. We've just spoken and texted and stuff like that. But he's just absolutely took it to another level. Like he's done thousands of interviews with all the biggest investors, and his whole thing was, I'm going to learn how to be an investor by interviewing the best investors. And he, trust me, like he knows as much as anyone about this world, given what he's done. And then he's now parlayed that into starting a smaller fund and now a really big fund. And he's got, the founder of Spotify involved, big investors are involved with what he's doing. So big up to Harry, and it's really cool to see more of this is going to happen for sure. Anything else to add to that, boys, before we move on?
I was going to say that I was going to interrupt the Nelk Boys segment and say they're giving away a Ferrari 488 at the moment, which is like a 450 grand car, which just goes to show like the arbitrage that exists in.
Wait, what are they doing with the Ferrari?
Just giving it to one of their Instagram.
Oh, they're just giving it away. Oh, that's a Mr. Beast playbook, man.
Well, actually, this brings up, I'm going to ask you guys a question. If you look at all these creators like Mr. Beast, Logan Paul and his brother, like if we fast forward 20 years from now and I said one of them had become the first billionaire creator, like the YouTube creator or a podcast who became a billionaire.
I think it's got to be Mr. Beast, man.
Mr. Beast, right?
It's got to be Mr. Beast, dude.
Why do you think that?
I mean, he already has the audience size. Is it 50 million plus? If you're talking about first, I think it's got to be him, man. I mean,
yeah,
he's investing. Fair enough. The other side of the coin is that Logan and Jake are making so much money from boxing. Like, even though the match was complete shit by any objective standard,
they were just hugging for 8 rounds.
It didn't matter, right? It did not matter. People talked about it. We talked about it. I was memeing about it. You guys are joking about it. It's insane. It's just absolutely insane. My answer is not special, right? If saying Mr. Beast is going to be the first creator billionaire is like saying LeBron's going to be a billionaire, right? It's like, clearly they're on that trajectory.
Jack, you have an opinion on this? Nelk boys for the win. I don't know if they're going to be billionaires, but they're definitely crushing it either way, whatever they're doing.
I mean, the alcohol brand is a hell of a play, right?
Oh my God, yeah.
The acquisitions in that space over the last 5 years or something, just ludicrous. Didn't Clooney sell Casa Amigos for what, $1 billion or something idiotic?
Well, dude, let me walk through the Barstool example. It'll be the perfect segue into the next thing. I wrote about Spitting Chicklets, which is now the most popular hockey podcast in the world. They launched a vodka brand called Pink Whitney, and the amazing part is this. It all happened within the confines of the show and the interaction with the audience. So, Spitting Chicklets, hockey podcast, their presenting sponsor was a vodka brand, New Amsterdam Vodka. In an episode 18 months ago, so this has all happened within the last year and a half, they asked the two hosts, two former NHLers, just to say, what's your favorite vodka drink? And Ryan Whitney, very successful hockey player, he goes, my favorite drink is vodka with pink lemonade. And then he goes, basically says, I know I'm going to get roasted for this, but I don't give a shit. It's the greatest drink ever. Right after the episode, people start DMing pictures of pink lemonade and vodka. My buddy, Jeff Jacobson, is the manager for one of the podcast hosts, Paul Bissonnette, also huge hockey personality, arguably the biggest hockey personality, as a personality in the world right now. And they're just monitoring social. They're like, oh my God, people are just latching on to this pink lemonade idea. Similar to how people have been buying Bored Apes by listening to Jack, people were latching onto the pink lemonade idea. And they're just like, fuck it. We need to turn this into an alcohol brand. And in less than a year, they had created alcohol called Pink Whitney. It's literally just pink lemonade and vodka. I've had it. It hits you so hard. It's just so...
Trung had some this morning.
Dude, I had some this morning, man. Go to the liquor store, look for Pink Whitney. It is in... and they're selling out in niches that they never even thought existed. If you Google Pink Whitney, the top places are in the South, like Alabama, Arkansas, that have no hockey presence. It's become a party drink. Yeah, it's like a party drink, a shot drink. But anyways, long story short, it's doing $100 million a year. Or they've sold $100 million.
Crazy. And this is a great example of the ability to mitigate risk completely if you have distribution.
Right. Yeah.
We can manufacture or validate demand for a product before it exists. And Jake Paul and whoever else can send out one tweet and be like, do you want me to fight Floyd Mayweather? Get 50 million impressions in an hour, send that to whatever boxing promoter would make that happen and be like, look, we'll have at least this many people watch it, blah, blah, blah. It's a no-brainer to run it, right?
Yeah, Jack, you do this quite well. You do this on maybe not the 50 million impressions for a boxing match, but but even literally the hat you're wearing on your head. Correct me if I'm wrong. You'll post a design for a lot of these merch things and just see how people react. And if people like it, you'll put a next link like, oh, now available to buy, a limited order or something, right?
Yeah, I think that's been for the education products too. So people have either you like listen and see somebody say something. So the design product that we first built was a byproduct of a David Perel tweet. He's like, oh, I really want to learn this design skill set, specifically how to visualize an idea. So I just retweet that and say,
say no more, fam.
Yeah, and it's done. Yeah, exactly. And that's an interesting advantage that people have, and a really different shift in mindset, right? Where the traditional founder is sort of in the trenches, building a business, like bring it to market when you've already put 90% of the effort into it. And then the market's like, nah, we don't want that. Thank you.
Well, dude, I mean, I'm sure, Jack, you must, like, the amount of cold outreach you must get for people that have a product looking for distribution must be insane, right? Like, I'm getting hit up, and like, I haven't had the established track record of you've actually, dude, I have established track record of shit posting. Listen, the shit's A+, but like, let's be honest here, I'm not a business builder, right? And I'm already just getting hit left, right, and center. And
well, that's the crazy thing is you are, like, by the new definition, you are the launch pad, which is the most the toughest piece to crack. Like organic, the thing about the increase in like the volume of content and the competition for attention is like the trusted distribution is going to be the only asset to scale something near enough.
I've actually never heard that adjective, which is funny. I've heard of trusted distribution. Yo,
coin it terms right here.
Yo, dude. Trusted distribution.com.
Yeah. Let's check it out.
Yeah.
Did it right now. .btc, just in case. Create a new address. All right.
But man, BTC is trustless distribution.
Oh, yeah, that's true. That's true. All right. Fiat fan coming out hot. All right. So, but look, so you mentioned first of all, actually, I just want to comment to say, a reminder that Trung is Canadian, because you're listening to, what is it? Hockey podcast, bro? Like,
yeah, it's actually it might be the most popular podcast in Canada, actually, which is not surprising.
Are you a hockey fan?
I used to be. I'm not a huge hockey fan.
All right, cool. I just wanted to see how much you lean in. All right, so you mentioned Barstool. That brings us on to the next big story, which is related to this, was Call Her Daddy is going to Spotify. I think it's 30 million a year for 2 years. It sounds like
20 million a year for 3 years.
20 million for 3 years. All right. So 60 million total. And like, let's dig into this example, man, because this is like crazy story.
I've been doing
Trung, you've been doing some research. So like, first of all, give us the background for people who don't know what Call Her Daddy is. Even some people don't know what Barstool is, and kind of like what they're doing with Spotify now.
All right. I'm going to go on a bit of a rant. So prepare yourself, have a sip of your coffee. So Barstool Sports is one of the leading kind of sports comedy websites in the world, or digital media properties. Over the last 5 years, they've built up a massive podcasting business. I think they have 30 plus podcasts, and they might be the fourth or fifth largest podcast distributor in the world right now, or in America. So they have more than ESPN, for example, as a comparison point. And they basically found Alex Cooper and Sophia. I don't know another female named Sophia. So two New York kind of young professionals. They saw them on Instagram. I think Sophia and Alex had created some type of either video content or audio content. And the Barstool team's like, oh, this is interesting. We don't have, we would like to get into this young, under 30 kind of young professional female market. And Alex and Sophia talked a lot about like the locker room stuff, right? Like a lot of sex positive talk is how they say it. And so Barstool goes to them and they're like, and they agree to do a deal. So I'm going to walk through the deals. What this was cut in 2018. And everything I'm going to say, what I want to start with is that this will be the playbook. What Barstool and Dave Portnoy, you guys know what I'm talking about, and Erica Nardini, the Barstool CEO, what they did with Alex and Sophia, like this deal structure and how it played out, is literally going to be the playbook moving forward for individual creators and interacting with corporations. So they're like, okay, we're going to give you 70,000 base and I think about 5% of merchandise upside. So 70,000 base doesn't sound like a lot, but Barstool has a huge distribution, right, across all mediums. And the podcast absolutely blew up. Year one, the girls ended up making $500,000 each about. So that means the merch component was their 5% of the merch component means the merch was millions and millions of dollars, right? And then last year, about this time, there was a big blow up because they're getting so big that they want to renegotiate the contract. And a lot of people may have heard about the story then because Portnoy took over their podcast feed. A lot of the audience of Call Her Daddy, obviously female-centric, had never even heard of his voice, right? Or even really knew he was because there's a totally tangential audience to what Barstool was building.
And actually, Trung, wrote, just to add, he's not just like a regular, like, oh, he's your boss, like wearing a suit sort of guy. He's like out there saying crazy stuff.
He's one of the crazy, he's an internet-first creator, right? 2.5 million on Twitter. Is worth hundreds of millions of dollars because Barstool had sold a third of their business to Penn Gaming, which we'll talk about later for about valuations $450 million. But yeah, so they renegotiated the contract and the girls wanted bigger guaranteed money and more percentage of the upside, right? And the reason it kind of blew up was Portnoy said in this takeover of this podcast, he explained his exact thinking about talent. He's like, I want creators to renegotiate. Because that just means everybody's winning, right? He says, if I tell any creator to come, it's like, listen, we'll do a 3-year contract. If in 3 years you're bigger than you are now or way bigger and you want to leave, good, leave. Like, we're all winning, right? It's like, I've made you bigger, you've made us money. And the reason he got mad at this time last year was they broke the contract, right? They're basically saying, we're trying to leave this contract. He's like, listen, I'm fine to renegotiate, but we had a timeline that we agreed on. But anyways, long story short is Sophia ended up leaving the podcast and Alex Cooper stayed on and she stayed with Barstool. So a year from that kind of breakup, she just got the Call Her Daddy property acquired by Spotify, exclusive for $60 million over 3 years. But here's the thing. A year ago when she renegotiated with Barstool, they gave her the IP because they own the IP to begin with.
Which isn't that common. I heard that was something she really wanted. And Portnoy was like, yeah, okay, this is a big deal, but we're willing to do it.
Right. So this all speaks to how...
What does IP mean in the context of a podcast? Like all the content
probably owning owning the RSS feed, owning the audience, and owning the name of the brand, right?
Got it.
Yeah.
And then, speaking to how important the RSS feed is like when Dan Patrick, is either Dan Patrick or one of the ESPN big guys, he left ESPN and part of his negotiation to leave was to get the feed, the RSS feed for his podcast. Because, Bilal, you can speak to this. It's so hard to build an audience in podcasting, right?
Yeah, well, you guys know too now. So
yeah, exactly. So, so I just want to talk to you some key points because I know I just kind of rambled on a lot. But the point is that, so Barstool structured a deal where they gave not a ton of guaranteed, but they gave huge on the upside. If you can hit these numbers, you're getting paid. They made $500,000 the first year. And then they negotiated for the IP of the property, right? And we just spoke about it. It's the RS feed. It's the name of the brand. But what's happening with actually Portnoy talked about with her Alex Cooper leaving to Spotify. He released something 3 days ago. He said, I actually am very happy with how this deal went out because she had gone to a point where she was getting offered money where we could pay her $20 million a year, but to justify that, we would have to hit every single milestone that we put into that contract, and it no longer made sense for us to do that. And we just looked at it like athletics. James Harden, LeBron James. These are like James Harden, LeBron James type numbers, right? And he's like, she fully deserves it because she's a monster. She's doing Rogan-esque type downloads for her podcast. Having said that, it doesn't make sense for us to keep her on those terms, but we still get a ton of upside because we're splitting merch with her.
Yeah.
So Barstool is still doing merch with Alex,
Alex Cooper.
Yeah. And the whole point is that now she gets the Spotify audience, right? So Barstool's still winning. So if you're looking at the life cycle of this 3-year relationship, a superstar creator gets the benefit of a Barstool to blow them up. But then Barstool, when you leave, gets the benefit of some type of upside, whether that be maybe future content projects, which they have a deal with, and merch, and who knows what else, right? So this structure of the deal is exactly how it should be in the future for any superstar content creator.
Yeah, Trunk, thanks for the summary. A few things to add to that was, I think a lot of people who aren't really used to this world and understand like how the upside works, or like a deal like this would work, because why would you if you never come across it before? Like, it sounds crazy that she was paid 70K, like you said in the beginning, but for context, I've heard her speak about this, and they were both quite happy with it because they didn't. I don't think they earned that before. They were doing like odd jobs or whatever, and they were like, oh cool, we get a chance to prove ourselves on this big platform. So at that stage, it was a good trade-off. At the time, Barstool took a punt on them, invested in them, and then within a year, like, they've already got crazy upside. They're getting what they deserve, and you could argue that maybe they deserve more or whatever, but that's kind of a sliding scale. But now fast forward only 2-3 years later, this is kind of unheard of, right? Like, this level, someone just popping out of nowhere, crushing it. I think the other comparable at this scale is I mean, there's a handful, but obviously Joe Rogan was the biggest one going to Spotify.
It took him 12 years, right? Alex,
it took him 12 years. Exactly. And he was doing it for years. He was also an established comedian by that point. And like, he was on TV and like, he had all this stuff. Versus Alex, she was literally just someone who didn't have anything and built something herself. And I know we talked about this in the DMs, but like, she literally did all the editing herself for ages. Yeah. And even when she was spilling it with the other girl, she would go home late at night and like be doing it all night. So like, respect to her for doing all that. But yes, I think it's a good deal for everyone. Like you said, like they're still getting some upside. It doesn't really make sense for them to be paying that amount, for Barstool to be paying that amount, because totally. The economics of their business is not the same as Spotify. Spotify is valued on future valuation and upside as a tech company.
And lock-in, right? They're looking for different things.
Exactly.
And actually, Portnoy talked about this. He's like, the value to her to Spotify is just so much greater than the Barstool now. It's because we already have an audience, right? So she's bringing her audience over to Spotify. He's like, but here's the thing, is like, her audience now knows about Barstool. They've known about us for 3 years now. Is like, that's an audience we never had. And now there's familiarity with us, right? But there's not much more that she can add on top of that to justify this 20 mil a year, right? She can keep doing what she's doing, being a monster, but to Spotify, going from zero of that audience to what she's bringing is worth the 20 mil. And he's just like, it gets to a point where, and I think this is going to repeat over and over and over again, right? It's like, there's going to be these creators that blow up in a media property, and traditional media property, and it just makes less sense for both parties to kind of maintain that relationship. Whereas big tech, which is trying to break into all types of media, like Apple just tossing money around, right? Like Google tossing money around, Amazon tossing money around. Now you get to bring this audience up to, I mean, you might even look at it tiers, right? It's like, if you're a nobody creator, you start working your way up the tiers. And, like Barstool, huge media platform, huge distribution, but there's also, there's a big bad boss ahead of that, which is big tech. Right. So maybe that's just the way to look at it. No, Jack, how do you feel about all that?
Jack, you got a thought?
Yeah, I think in 3 years it's going to look like a bad deal. Maybe in a year it'll look like a bad deal. Obviously, Spotify.
A bad deal for who? For Spotify or for Alex?
No, for her.
For her.
Oh, you're taking the Andrew Wilkinson route.
Yeah.
For anybody that don't know, Andrew Wilkinson is basically saying anybody that's this level as a podcaster, they have the tools now just to go out on their own. And like Sam Harris is the example he uses. Sam Harris, a philosopher, writer, kind of one of the greatest think boys of the 21st century. Intellectual.
Think boys.
He's probably making 10 mil a year on a subscription-based podcast.
Right.
And he owns the audience.
I think it's like, the Spotify obviously understands the exponent of media and the internet greater than, they have more data than anybody else in like, I'll dart all over the place in this, but the rate of change is so crazy that signing a 3-year contract as someone that has that level of distribution, you may look back, if you grow at 0.1% a day compounded, in 3 years' time, you're just going to be ridiculous.
Right.
And not to say you'll ever be bigger than Spotify or you're like, but if you're like legitimately on track to be one of the biggest podcasts in the world or one of the biggest personalities in your niche in the world, it's like, would Jake Paul sign a deal with Spotify? I doubt it. Like, doesn't need to. Like you're not quite big enough to launch your own platform, or not. Maybe it's not the deal; it's the length of the deal, or the fact that it's not negotiated.
I think it's the length that you're talking about,
or the structure of it isn't like, okay, if we hit X, it's performance related, or I get X amount in net new subscriptions that I bring to the platform, or some shared upside that acknowledge it. And maybe this is part of the deal, but we don't know, upside that acknowledges like the profound. The advantage that they've obviously identified in her. I'm not saying that $20 million a year is a bad deal. It's a great deal, right? You're just
saying, what is the market? What is the market? I mean, I think the analogy that we can all relate to, or anybody here that's listening that watches sports, right? You'll see it all the time. It's like a lot of athletes will lock themselves in. It's always a question of, do you take the money to protect yourself for security, or do you bet on yourself, right? Where you'll take a little bit, it's a risk reward situation, right? And so a lot of athletes, NBA is my favorite sport. So I know you guys are big football, soccer fans, whatever. Don't say armball. Nobody cares. Just fucking, but people will take 1-year contracts in the NBA to be like, you know what? I'm just going to prove myself in this 1 year and hit the open market. So I think that's what Jack's saying is like, now once this open market, she's off the open market, presumably for 3 years, right? So like, what's going to happen in those 3 years?
I would say, Jack, I definitely agree with you. And I think that's because we're on the same side of the spectrum in terms of looking at upside, looking at maximizing, she could basically maximize revenue in a different way if she went herself, owned 100% of it. At the same time, I will say someone like her and Joe Rogan, just because I've heard them speak about it, they might not necessarily be optimizing for that outcome, right? And for her, she's probably, again, I don't know her, but I think she's like, I just want to be able to focus on the stuff I like, do this crazy stuff, have a great lifestyle, and then let them figure out all the other stuff and keep propelling me, and I'm going to be one of the top people that they're focused on. And I think Joe Rogan, similar, like to Andrew Wilkinson's tweet storm about this, like I agreed again with what he said on the numbers side, but I've heard Joe Rogan specifically talk about this. He's like, I don't care. Like I'm making $100 to $200 million. I'm gonna lock in. I don't have to worry about all this ad stuff anymore. Like they're gonna figure that out. I'm gonna just tour with Dave Chappelle, and I'm gonna like live the best life. I'm like 50 years old. Who cares about more money?
True,
man. You're not like having conversations about what's the freaking funnel to get new listeners. Or
exactly. And I think especially for creative people, like those two are, they're just like, let me focus on what I want. And if anything, like someone like Joe is probably wise enough where he realizes he doesn't need to become a billionaire. He's like, I'm already 100 millionaire. What else do I need by that point? So, but yeah, it's a really good point. It's interesting.
It's pretty fascinating, and see like who will be parallel pathing that, like the rate of growth, even for someone that maybe competes in that same world. It may be a net positive decision to have the Spotify distribution at this point in your career too, right? Because it just creates that advantage that's very, very hard for people to catch up with. And then the last thing I'll say on that, there is the flip side, which is Joe Rogan, Russell Brand, who went to Luminary, and maybe now Alex. I don't know what their situation is with YouTube, but the fact that those guys aren't on YouTube anymore, I think they've got a few clips and stuff, but the fact they're not available on YouTube anymore in an age where billions of people are coming on the internet for the first time and they're all using YouTube for free, right? Like we forget there's only, Trung probably knows the exact number, but like 2.5 to 3 billion people with internet access. Right. And there's 7.5 billion people, maybe 8, I don't know. So the fact that those people are the leaders in that field. Like I've literally seen a homeless guy on the street in New York watch Joe Rogan. Like I was walking past and it's like, that's the sort of stuff that...
So Bilal, let's talk about this a bit.
Yeah.
So Bilal handles all the logistics for NIA because he's a stud and has OCD. Well, I mean, that's unfair, man. I'm not saying you're much more diligent than I am. I'll say that.
Go on.
So, I mean, talk us through YouTube, right? Like you're like, yeah, we definitely got to be on YouTube. So, talk through the mechanics of that.
Well, again, it comes back to like what stage of growth you're in, like what your objective is, right? So for us, we're optimizing for having fun primarily. Like us
Number
three,
one.
just like we're like, if we have fun, we're going to keep doing this.
Yeah.
And it brightens up the week a little bit. Two, we say, oh, well, we've already got some people interested in our stuff. You two, mostly from Twitter, me from the podcast. Like, why don't we combine forces and maybe a few of them will kind of mingle together and we'll find something new that works. So that's kind of how we haven't got a big master plan, right? Like, we didn't have a business plan and go through the deck. So that's kind of how I was thinking of it. And then, so I guess from the stage of growth we're at, we're just like, why don't we just let people consume it where they want to consume? We're not overly optimizing. Like, you know, I've thought about this for my podcast when I originally launched it. Like, I only did audio first and then brought YouTube after. And the reason for that was, one, because it was too much work. And two, because I knew if I concentrated efforts in one place, I could get in the new and noteworthy and all the different charts and all that sort of stuff. Whereas for us, we were like, okay, it's 2021. Like, there's so many podcasts out there. Let's just let people, if they like it, let them watch it. And if they want audio, let them have it on audio. But like, I don't know if your question was more around like what goes into it or how I think about it. But
no, I guess the only thing I've heard that, you know, because of YouTube's the second biggest search engine in the world, right?
Yeah.
And it's just actually has great discovery. So people are just like, you know what, just if you have the video, just put it on YouTube. Like, there's a way better chance that's getting discovered there than on freaking like iTunes. Yeah,
that's a great point, because to be discovered on podcasts is really difficult, right? Like, and if you just look at the top charts, like, it's almost impossible to find anyone. And this is what I said about Alex Cooper. It would probably be completely impossible for her to get in the position she's gotten in 3 years by going direct in podcasting specifically. In YouTube, you could probably do it. And in fact, I've seen people with 1 million subscribers, but on podcasts, just to compete in the top 100, like, most of those people aren't individuals that have started in the last few years. If they were individual. Yeah, they're like backed by some, even like Sean and Sam, like they're doing an incredible job on their podcast, but they had the 2 million person list to send an email to when they launched from day one with the hustle. So there's all these examples. And I think that's why when you see someone like that kind of winning, you're like, oh, right, good for them. They figured out a way to get in that position and it's worked out for them. So yeah, man. Really, really cool stuff either way in this space, man. Like, there's going to be so much more of this. Anything else before we move on to the crazy DeFi world?
Oh, I got a bridge from media to DeFi.
Let's do it.
Remember
Here we go.
Spencer Noon tweet yesterday about the tokenization of creators and the $1 billion market cap of a creator?
Oh, yeah.
Wait, talk through that.
Could you go on? Yeah, do you remember it? In fact, we might even share the screen if we have it up, because it's probably
pull it up in a. I don't know if it's safe to be pulling up the group chat here, boys, but let me direct it to the tweet.
Yeah, I was going to say, while you're doing that, Trung and I can stall. But yeah, man, like when you said just there, the Spencer Noon tweet from yesterday, I'm like, what, one of the 152 tweets we sent yesterday?
Yeah.
There's so many.
Here it is. Here we go. Creator tokens with $1 billion market caps will be here a lot faster than you realize. I'm highly interested in connecting with creators and builders, building towards this. So, the Caller Daddy example is, has to be top 100 in the world of somebody that might be able to achieve something like this, right? They have the distribution and the rabid fan base. And so the one thing that doesn't exist in my opinion yet is the cultural acceptance of a tokenized person in order to make that happen. But like he's saying here, that's gonna snowball and it'll quickly change. But it's really interesting to think about. I think this is the Jake Paul thesis. Like, I think it says on the AngelList memo, the most desired professional outcome for a kid in the Western world right now is to be a YouTuber, right?
100%.
And that idea of wanting upside in that, whether or not you're competing to be that yourself or you admire somebody, in the same way that like a different generation would invest in a business that they know is going to succeed, or they have a good, they believe in X. The idea that people are going to invest directly in creators is going to happen, right? We're seeing it happen. It's going to get more popular. So if the Caller Daddy merch operation is like, I don't know, $5-10 million a year, this is just the most simple example I can think of. Say you hold X% of Caller Daddy $daddy token, right? And then for the position you hold, you get a dividend based on like ad reads. So say they're doing 5 million a year in ad reads and they do 5 million in merch. You get a percentage dividend based on that. So it incentivizes the entire audience to pump the living daylights out of the content as well. So everybody's invested, everybody's propelling the message, everybody's like talking their book. And you can harness that as a creator and just, I mean, I think it's just like financial regulations and things are just way, way behind where all this stuff is going. So nobody's touching it for that reason too, because they don't want to be.
There's literally no greater talking your own book than pumping up
exactly.
It's incredible.
And that's the way it's going. One of the thoughts I had on this the other day is like Elon's businesses have been so far ahead of like culture that there is no regulation that exists to regulate them, right? The self-driving car, I remember seeing that for the first time. I was like, how the hell is that legal? So like say press a button in your car and it's going to drive itself. It's legal because there's no law that's even considered that somebody is nutty enough to make that thing, right? And then you have all of the other things he's built, like flying up satellites and making a like decentralized internet network. There's no governing body. I imagine maybe there is something. You probably have to get permission to fire a satellite up, but beyond that, you know, it's so far ahead of culture and law, and the internet does all these crazy things where I don't see a room of 500 70-year-olds figuring out how to regulate a lot of this stuff. But as soon as it will be a domino effect, right? Somebody will do it, you know, Jake Paul token. I want a part of Jake Paul's career over the next few decades.
So are you seeing, because we've talked about BitClout as one area. There's other players out there who are literally allowing you to create creator coins, like Rally is a guy I interviewed on Creator Lab. Crazy smart guy who had $1 billion company from gaming and saw that space, and he's leaning into it. So yeah, I mean, like, I think you already kind of described how that could potentially work, and I agree with it. Like, if I could have invested in Jack Butcher coin, or 3 years ago when I first saw it, and I was like, oh, this guy's killing it. Let me get. I don't want to just support him.
On BitClout, buddy.
I'm a Jack Butcher holder, man. Don't worry about it. And actually, I've got some Trung too. Don't worry. Yeah. But so yeah, I think that's an interesting way to think about it. But is that how you just see it happening? Is like these sort of platforms?
It's just a big, I think it will be. I think it has to come through a platform, and the UX has to be there, right, to onboard the number of people that would be required to float $1 billion of volume. In this example, it's like even BitClout feels like there's too much friction to get that much money on the platform, especially from the type of people, not to generalize, that listen to Call Her Daddy, probably are not crypto nerds in percentage points. So that to me is like, but if you're on iTunes and you could say buy, or iTunes equivalent, right? A platform that just takes your Apple Pay and says, like, every time I listen to an episode, I want to buy a cup of coffee's worth of stake in this person's career. It's going to happen. Somebody's going to figure it out. But it's so messy right now that, I don't know, it's like a delicate dance. I think the decentralization argument is going to create all of these, like, you know, thousands of attempts to do it. But what really needs to happen is, like, you need the Robinhood for investing in people if you want to see that kind of thing materialize, which is
just
not
like
really,
you're saying, like really turnkey, right? It's
ease of use. No one needs to figure out like when we use BitClout for the first time, like within 2 clicks, something's messed up already. Like that, people just an average person won't do that. We might.
Well, let's talk about BitClout. Actually, can you guys explain what BitClout is? And also, there's been some recent milestones that kind of quote unquote legitimize the platform. So if you guys can just talk about that, I know not every listener will be as
Jack,
versed in it.
I feel like you've been actually creating stuff for it. So what is it first of all, and what made you change your mind on working on it more?
So it got announced, I think, close to 6 months ago, maybe, or 3-4 months ago. I don't remember the exact date, but decentralized social is the idea. So a social platform where everything you write is recorded on chain, it's immutable. There's no moderation from the top down. So obviously that brings its challenges, but the thing that
it looks like a Twitter knockoff is the other part.
Yeah,
I might just share my screen, so while you're speaking, I can just share for people who've never seen it before, just what it looks like. But
it's like a crypto looking Twitter, right? It's got the monospaced font.
Can you guys see that?
Yeah. Feed. You can post tweet or you can post clouts. And every creator
Craig's
on there,
coin is ripping. Holy shit.
Craig. Yeah. And for people who are only listening on audio, click the link in the description for the YouTube.
I mean, he must be one of. I've seen him.
He's number 3.
Holy shit, man!
Yeah, he rose up the ranks. So this is Craig Clemens. For people who don't know who he is, he's like a business guy, and he's also he was like a copywriter guy, and he's made a bunch of money with his companies, and he's also does a lot of philanthropy stuff. That's how I know him from Charity Water. He's like a well member. So yeah, he's a great guy. But yeah, he's just risen up the ranks. Like he's literally number 3 biggest coin on here.
Well, click on Chamath. Click on Chamath.
Yeah.
So he came through this week. So he started posting. So there's a big tide turn. To go back to the beginning of the story of BitClout, they marketed it in a genius way because they reserved all these profiles for people that already have massive Twitter followings.
Yeah.
And assigned they pre-mined a bunch of BitClout, which is the token, and assigned it to those accounts. And you could claim it by signing in and tweeting out a link that you were setting up your BitClout account. So it's a brilliant growth hack, viral marketing built into it. And a lot of the crypto community were very resistant to it at first, and a lot still are, because of the pre-mining is like this tactic that is not inherently consistent with the diehard crypto principles.
The ethos.
You're taking people's identity without their permission and leveraging that to get attention. So there's a lot of issues that people took up with it. In the last few months, they've released the code base. So there was a lot of
open sourced it, right?
Yeah. So there was a lot of speculation that it was just going to be a complete rug pull, right? People go in there and they
they had hundreds of millions of worth of ether inside.
Yeah. Bitcoin.
It's actually Bitcoin.
Yeah. And so they had all this money. You could invest in the platform and buy coins, but you couldn't withdraw it, which is crazy that they got anybody to participate in it. Honestly,
Can you take money out yet?
So they just got listed on an exchange. So
on blockchain.com or crypto.com or something. Yeah.
Yes, one of those. So that all of the things that were dodgy about it to a lot of people a few months ago, a lot of them have been addressed, or there's been some response to it. There's still people that just don't fundamentally agree with the philosophy of the platform, I guess. But you're now seeing bigger personalities show up there.
Yeah. So just this week we had Brian Armstrong, founder of Coinbase. I think Chamath, like you said, has been posting for the first time in a long time, or first time. So yeah, I think that helps as well, because you realize, okay, there's investors that are behind this that people have heard of and respect. And then there's these people. Of course, stuff could still go wrong, but I think that definitely helps. So yeah, Jack, for you, what are you seeing with it now as yourself? Because you've been creating stuff on there. How are you finding it compared to other places that you post on Twitter and Instagram, for example?
It's interesting. It's Balaji is a guy to follow on BitClout as well, because he writes different stuff on there to Twitter, and his, galaxy brain take on a different incentive structure underneath a social network. There's a lot of really smart stuff that he writes. People can develop apps that sit on top of it. So obviously you have access to the source code. So a different way than just an API call on Twitter, you could redesign, you could do a new front end for BitClout, or you could build new notifications into it. You could build new incentive structure. So it's kind of evolves by consensus and adoption versus, something like a Twitter, which is just a top down, updates are pushed out from San Francisco, right? What else was I going to say about that? It's interesting. You get a lot less, it's a lot more positive in general, right? Because everybody has an economic value assigned to their name. And if you go around shitting on people's work, then nobody's going to buy your stuff. Nobody's going to support what you're doing. So it does create this positive environment, but it also creates this like kind of gambling.
Pumping. There's a lot of pumping going on.
Yeah, exactly.
Speculation.
So, exactly. And that's like a really difficult thing to address. And when you see these takes on like $1 billion creator coins, I think for it to really take off, it has to be more, maybe not more thoughtful, but there just has to be less, I don't think the general public is ready for that level of volatility. Like if I'm, signing up for BitClout and I wake up one morning and my market cap's dipped 50% and I'm like a crypto diehard, I'm just like, this is demoralizing. I'm not going to do this. So I think it's like, it's going to be a really interesting social experiment. And maybe it's like, it just ends up as a vehicle to speculate on like celebrity growth and like a certain type of person. But it feels like there's a lot of cultural barriers to overcome for it to be adopted by everyone. And what scale do you really have to be to make a living off that? Like if you have if you have $1 million market cap and then 10% of that is yours, in some parts of some people's lifestyles, especially people who have garnered the amount of attention to warrant $1 million coin price, $100,000 is not a lot of money.
And then if you're dumping that for cash, it's not going to look great either.
Right.
So that's the thing. If you sell anything, it kind of notifies even. Because when I first joined BitClout, I put like $1,000 of my own money into platform to play around with it. I was like buying people's coins that I like and stuff like that. And I just store it as if this went to zero, like that was worth the learning. But now I was like, now it's gone up a little bit. Like some people would put it in mine. And I was like, let me take out my initial stake. And then I was like, all these people are going to think I'm like dumping on them, which I'm not. So it's it's a tough one. But anyway, I think that's a really well described on BitClout specifically. But I think if we think about like what this is going to look like in the future, there's not just going to be BitClout. There's going to be 4, 5, maybe 10 different ways people are being able to speculate or be a part of their communities or whatever. And I think there's an overlap between BitClout, this other kind of creator coin stuff I mentioned before, and then even like NFTs. So like with Gary V, for example, I don't know all the details, but he's got this whole V Friends thing going. He's got like a Discord or whatever with people in there in his little community, but he's packaging it up with other stuff in the real world as well. So they're doing events, and you kind of get access to his special club by buying NFTs. And I think that's quite smart because previously, like us, we've got a podcast. We could say, hey, everyone, we're doing one a week. If you want the second one every week, join our Patreon. And maybe we'll do like an event once in a while. You'll get early access. But now there's more creative executions of that idea. And instead of just paying Gary V's team, you're getting an actual piece of like V Friends or whatever it is. It looks like a little Pokemon thing.
So what you're trying to say is we got some Pokemon NIA merch coming.
Who's going to get Fiat Fan before he becomes $1 trillion fan? But yeah, that was really interesting. Anything else from you two on that before we move on? Because there's lots going on in this DeFi crypto world that we wanted to touch on.
We could do a segment on this every week, so let's move on. All
right, cool.
You guys should dump on this is also Cuban DeFi. I have no idea what's going on, so I'm going to be a listener and I'm going to throw questions as if.
All right, me too. So no pressure, Jack. before we get into that, I'm going to just share my screen again here because I think our friend John Rich, aka Coked Up Options on Twitter really summarized. Can you guys see my screen here?
Yeah.
So just to tee up, so John Rich, for people listening, said, want to be a crypto millionaire, start as billionaire Mark Cuban and invest in Titan. It's so good. And the reason I kicked that off with that is because there's two big stories here. One is during the week, one of you guys, maybe Jack, had shared Mark Cuban's blog post, which was titled The Brilliance of Yield Farming, Liquidity Providing, and Valuing Crypto Projects. And if you're listening and you don't know what the hell that means, don't worry, 99.9% of the world doesn't either. And then
I don't think Mark Cuban knows what that means.
Completely. So that was the first thing. And a lot of us within our group chat anyway, we were all saying, man, like this guy's really deep. Like he's getting in there, like he's in these Discord channels, like chatting to people and really getting in it. And I think he genuinely really likes this stuff. But then what happened, fast forward, like only in the last few days, one of the things he wrote about, which is called Titan, basically went to zero. And so, and again,
what is Titan, and how big of a stake did Cuban have from what you guys understand? And has he responded to it going to zero?
When before this podcast, there was nothing on his Twitter feed talking about it.
So what is Titan?
It's some like DeFi protocol. I think it's either I think it was an actual asset. Titan, right?
I think so. There's Titan, and then there's like Iron or something, which was a stable coin, from what I understand. And there's a lot of jargon here. So let's just, because we had a few people asking us to define stuff. So DeFi is decentralized finance. TradFi is traditional finance, which we're all used to, the banking system. Mm-hmm. DeFi is this new world being built where people are essentially being able to do everything in traditional finance, but through no central party, so no bank needed. So for example, I could lend my money out to someone else and get the interest instead of the bank making 6% and giving me 0.1. I will get a lot of the upside. There's also things like self-paying loans, which sounds like a scam, but then when you see how it works, you're like, wow, this is actually a real thing. And then there's these things called liquidity farms. The way I would describe this, and again, I might be completely wrong, so comment in the YouTube comments below to let me know how dumb I was here. But the way I think of a lot of these things, when you're trading Ethereum or any currency or Ether for another currency, there needs to be money in the middle, essentially, to allow the transactions to happen. So if I'm someone who's willing to put my money up in these pools, I'm again getting upside from all these fees of these transactions, whereas previously, again, the bank or money exchange would make that. And again, I might have completely screwed that up, but that's kind of how I've been seeing it from what I've been reading.
Wait, guys, hold on. I have a note here.
Go on.
Cuban has addressed the issue.
Oh, live. Let's do it.
Let's do it.
So, Mark Cuban wrote, he thinks regulation should be in place to define what a stable coin is. So he's writing now that they should regulate this stuff. Oh my God.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, to be fair, on his blog post, right at the top, it says, this is not investment advice. So, people made their own decisions. But go on, Jack, what are you going to say?
So I think you at least matched my understanding of defining those terms, and it feels like there is a huge amount of arbitrage because the system is growing at such a huge rate, right? So people are entering the system, are paying fees, and then you by lending liquidity to a pool for people to swap between all these currencies, you can capture some of those fees as upside, and the greater the return, the riskier the pool of assets you're being mixed in with or lending toward. And this is tangential, but one of the things that I read in some Twitter thread about this last night was because this world is growing so quickly, there's like a dearth of talent that can actually audit the smart contracts that underlie a lot of
completely. That's securities. A great point.
So it's like these things can be really well intentioned, and it's obviously like nascent technology, nascent code, and it's running perfectly. And I was like, it's too good to be true. And then X happens, Millennium Bug style, like overlook.
Millennium Bug.
I mean, dude, that's how whenever there's a new paradigm shift or whatever, these careers that just take off, right? Like,
yeah,
we could
that's
go
gonna
back.
Be one of them.
You go back to like the 40s or whatever, go back to when they did fracking, right? In the 80s. It's like, hey, listen, if you're a petroleum engineer and you know how to do this stuff, like you're going to get paid. This is like the equivalent of that, right?
Yeah. If you can and the thing is, solidity or audit contracts, crazy.
And I was just going to say, because this doesn't mean, a lot of people will just hear the headline, which is DeFi, zero scam, right? And this is like anything. It's like if I said to you, banking system Lehman Brothers zero, or whatever happened in the past.
That's a great analogy.
Right. Like there's you're oversimplifying. So DeFi is a really incredible space, and there's really interesting, innovative stuff happening. But there's different segments, right? Like the ones that I've been playing around with, you're not getting 10,000% APY, right? Like you're getting 20%, 15%, and that's a lot more reasonable returns on your money. But those are the big kind of like blue chip DeFi things like Compound, Aave, stuff like that. And those ones have been audited, right? And they've got like lots of really smart people working on it, billions of dollars worth of money in them already. And then you got the next segment, which I would say are, good ideas, not necessarily badly intentioned, but like haven't been audited, and there are smart contract bugs and stuff like that can be exploited, or things haven't been tested out. And then there's the final one, which hopefully is less, but there's actual real Ponzi schemes and people trying to fraud people out. So you need to be careful of those. That's how I'd group them. From my understanding, I don't know enough about this one, but the big catalyst for this is one that there was like, what was it called, Titan, and then Iron or something, which was the stable coin, something like that, but it was an algorithmic stable coin. So again, we don't have time to go into what that means, but essentially the algorithm fucked up, right? Because as more and more money was going out of one, I think it impacted the price of the stable coins. So stable coins are supposed to be $1, right? But over time, it kept I think dropping. Exactly. So long story short, in a very quick amount of time, stuff dropped to zero. And I don't know the reality of what's happening now, but it looks like, obviously some people might have lost some money, and it's going to give a bad name to that. I think Mark Cuban's going to be on the back foot.
What do you mean?
And that's tough because he's been...
read?
Obviously, I don't think he's trying to scam anyone, because has more to lose. I just think
how will this look for him? He over the last couple of months has looked like a guy that's embracing crypto. Yeah. Letting Dogecoin be used as a medium of exchange at the Maverick Stadium, at games, and just being a kind of being a support
evangelist.
I mean, this part looks bad. I mean, it looks awful for him on that front,
I think it does. Yeah. I think it does, but I think, if you're going to be involved with this sort of stuff, there's always going to be the simplified headlines. And I think crypto gets a lot of that already, good and bad, right? A lot of people are just seeing the headline that something's up 1,000%, and they get involved, and then they lose their money a year later and sell everything. So I think he's in a position now where, he should probably clarify. I didn't read what he's posted already just recently. But it's a tough one, man, because most people, you're going to have to explain to people why something happened where most people don't even understand what's happening in the first place. So 98% of people aren't even going to listen. And then you've just got this stain on you. But Jack, what do you reckon?
I mean, I think it's one of these things where it's you don't even know what to look out for. It's that new that I think you've had a positive experience for X number of months. To conflate that with this thing is good and can't break is just, for somebody that has that level of distribution and influence. And you could argue that that's you could say not investment advice. There's 48 people probably watching this right now. So hopefully the extent of the damage of people ignoring anything we talk about. And I would say that we're not making the same assertions, right? Where Cuban's reputation is huge, and rightly so, because he has made great calls over the course of 3 decades. And for him to endorse something like this is it's a big signal, right? And it probably tipped a lot of people into it. And now he's probably feeling,
he's probably feeling
rough.
I just want to say he actually constructed one of the most legendary .com era trades, right? He sold broadcast.com to Yahoo for I think $5.7 billion. And he got a bunch of Yahoo stock in the deal, and he went to Goldman. He's like, okay, Yahoo stock is $95 a share. I think we're in a bubble and the shares are locked up. I can't sell. So he did a collar trade, which is basically he guaranteed using options. He guaranteed $95 a share would be the worth of his the deal that he would walk away with. But then Yahoo ran up to like 235, so tripled. Everybody's like, oh, what an idiot. And then it crashed to 13. It looks like a fucking genius, right?
Oh, damn. Yeah.
So pretty funny. I think just the reason I'm telling that story is that, he's made a very legendary moves and trades in the past, clearly. You have to see how this plays out. Like, I think it's too soon to tell, but the optics are not great as of today.
It's not great. It's not great, but I will say, again, I haven't read his full blog post or his apology or whatever he's put out. So he didn't say, I'm an investor in this thing, come and use my platform. He said, this is something I'm playing around with. Know the risks, and he said he's only putting a small amount of money in it. So I think macro level, he's going to be proved right that this stuff is really interesting. It is potentially the future. He's going to keep investing in it. And the people who just disregard him and say, oh, well, anything he says in the future is I'm not going to listen to. Well, then I think they'll probably miss out, because he's probably going to keep finding interesting stuff. And it's just on us to say, all right, if something's 1,000% or 10,000% return, there's probably a reason for that, right? Like, it's not rocket science. And I've been in some of these discords where people are like, look, the rug could be pulled at any moment. So like, get in now and get out. And I'm like, okay, well, so you're going into it knowing that's the case. Yeah, what else do you expect? You should only put in the money in that sort of stuff where you're literally, we say this about Bitcoin, but I really mean it about this one. Like, this could go to
this
zero.
This one is legit completely. Buyer beware. This one is like completely. All jokes aside. It's like, come on, guys.
Yeah.
Listen to the title of the podcast.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I don't know if we I know people had asked us to talk about this. It's quite a complicated topic. But yeah, hopefully we did. We talked enough about it. But was there anything else, boys, before we move on to the next one?
Well, actually, I know that I think we got like 10 minutes here. I got no more thoughts on this, but Bilal, I just want to see if you want to do the next one, just listener questions, unless Jack had a thought.
No, do it.
Go on. Yeah, so hopefully that was a good enough summary. The one thing I will real quickly add is we won't have time to talk about the whole thing, but there was also a guy who had his MetaMask wallet hacked recently. I think he lost $2 million worth of stuff. So maybe we'll like the reason I'm mentioning that is all of this stuff is super high risk, and I think it's worth it to be involved and figure out what's going on, because this is potentially the next huge wave of the financial infrastructure that's being built. But know what you're doing and take your time, and don't like jump to the stuff that is just gonna be too good to be true, because most of the time it is that. All right, let's do some quick audience questions. Let's see. The first one was from Joe Wolf Castle. He said, would be interesting to hear how you all know each other, if you've worked together or if you'd like to work together at some point in the future. Quite a good question. I would just say, from outside as a summary, none of us have met each other in person, first of all, which is kind of crazy, right? Like, that's
internet, bro.
It's amazing. So we all met basically on Twitter, I guess, if you want to call it that. It's weird, man. I've been talking about this to close in real life friends, and like we talk about the podcast, few of them listen, and they're like, you guys sound like you've known each other for years. And like,
it's just like chemistry, man, like crypto
you can't fake it. And yeah, so it's weird, man. Like we talk pretty much every day by this point in group chats and sending each other funny stuff. But yeah, anything else from you guys on that? You want to add?
That's it. The first time I heard Trung's voice, I was having a barbecue with Sam Parr in Austin. FaceTime. And he FaceTimed Trung, or the other way around. And ever since.
Yeah, never met a while. I feel like this is to answer the question, will we work together? I mean, this is it, right? Like, this is work for us. It's like work.
Yeah.
I mean, work. What is? I don't know if we'll quote unquote work together, but we're choosing to hang out and like put content out there. Some people might just see that as play, which it really is kind of right now.
The future of work is not working, boys. Hill, Lavinia. It's true.
So that definitely. I think the one thing is, I mean, also with Jack, like I met Jack through the podcast. We did one really good podcast, and I think we got on enough. We were like, oh, let's stay in touch. A lot of people say that, but Jack, I could actually tell he would like text me back and text me stuff that he didn't need to text me that stuff. You know what I mean? So I was like, oh, okay, we get on. We had a little UK vibe, and then by the time we did the next one, we did another podcast. And then we've just stayed in touch where we're like, oh, maybe we'll do something together. And similar to Trung, I don't know if Trung and I ever said, oh, we could do a podcast together, but we were like trying to encourage each other essentially with the work we were doing. And from me, when I approached you guys to do the podcast, it was because I thought, oh, these characters essentially coming together would probably be kind of cool. And like I knew that like you guys have got your own stuff, but you weren't doing something in this space. So that was kind of my pitch to you guys was.
I mean, honestly, like this is just, we're doing this anyway, just in a group chat, right? And now all we're doing is like
recording
basically rounding up
it.
weeks of group chatting in a conversation.
Exactly.
This is very far from work.
Yeah, just a fair point. But yeah, maybe in the future we'll see how it goes. I think just the way I like to work is I get to meet people, see if we actually genuinely like each other, get on. That's one part, which I think we already passed. The next part is, do we actually like working together, which is a different thing because the work styles can be very different. And then there's like, are there complementary things? Like, let's say someone starts a company, someone starts a fund, whatever. Like maybe there's other stuff, but for the moment, this is what we're doing, which is enough. It's been fun.
Spotify, if you're listening, we will do 20 million a year.
Each. Yeah. All right. Next one. Pranav, and a few people have asked this in the past about Trung's Reddit discovery. So I think I speak for everyone when I say I want to know how Trung finds such crazy stuff on Reddit. Laugh out loud.
I'll be honest with you. I'm not even like I used to post on Reddit. You can find my profile there. I don't have very much karma. It's like 1,500. When I did, it was all memes. Like I was starting up the meme thing. So I had some fire ones, but the TLDR is, what I tell everybody is like, you should just follow you literally just Google what are the most popular Reddit accounts. And this is how I tell people on board, follow all those. It's like, ask me anything, ask Reddit, interesting as fuck.
Shower thoughts.
Yeah. Just follow those and that'll get you used to kind of the interface and how the information is fed to you. But there's a tab in the phone that's called popular, and it's literally going to feed you the stuff that you have no idea exists. But half of it's all new. And it's categories that you've never heard of, and you literally just pick and choose what interests you, right? And like for me, like I clicked on one called history porn. It has nothing to do with pornography. It's just crazy images from history, right? And that was fed to me through the popular tab. I had no idea how they figured out I love history, but I do. And I just will pull some random stuff out of there. And then as you start doing all that, you start learning how to use the functionality of Reddit, which is search function, right? And following popular posters. So like that's literally it. Is you really the popular tag is really important because those are the things you'll have no idea that you even knew existed. And I get fed popular stuff all the time. A lot of that ends up like in the Twitter feed. So just to summarize is get the Reddit app on your phone. Follow the top 20 accounts. So just Google them, the biggest accounts on Reddit, and they'll recommend you subreddits all day. Just follow anyone that you find interesting, and that and the popular tab, which also feeds you new subreddits. So that's how you quote unquote find interesting stuff. It's like literally getting pushed to you.
Yeah, and Trung, one thing to add is on the app when you go to one of the subreddits, you go to top post. There's difference between hot posts, which are more like recent.
Yeah, you can look at, and you can sort any subreddit by the most popular posts of all time, right?
Yeah, so you can do like top posts all time, or this year, or like this month, or whatever.
And that tells you whether or not you're like, oh, I actually, this is interesting. I like this.
Completely.
I like this subreddit, right?
It's also a great idea for just like I've learned a bunch of stuff about like personal finance on a lot of their subreddits, like for the fires ones and the crypto stuff early on as well. And you just find these evergreen pieces where they're explaining the fundamentals of investing and stuff like that. And it's really cool. It's really
Blake Robbins, a venture capitalist, a pretty big Twitter personality. His tweet he had like 2-3 days ago, he was basically saying like, I want Reddit to be like my new first stop for search. I think Google is cluttered with ads. Interface is becoming kind of like, commerce-fied. He's like, Reddit has all this insane gold, right? It's just like these comments that you can find. The way it's categorized information is just incredible. I mean, listen, buyer beware. Like, this is so funny. I did a Reddit thread last week of one of these Ask Me Anythings of like, what are industry secrets that nobody knows about? I put out, I think, 25 or 30 of them. Fuck, of course some of that shit's gonna be like not vetted. Some guy writes me, he's like, you didn't vet this, did you? I'm like, dude, it's fucking Reddit. Jesus, there's like 3 layers of internet going on here. It's me finding something on Reddit from somebody who read something probably somewhere else on the internet, and like I'm putting it on Twitter. And people are like, hey man, like what's the one that IMDb used to do? Oh, IMDb, the movie database used to have a category called movie plot holes. People would be like, man, this movie has these crazy plot holes. Dude, it's a fucking movie, man. Jesus, of course it's gonna have plot holes. I'm like, I read these comments, and all I can think in my head is, idiot on internet finds some other content some other idiot wrote, and he complains that this guy found it somewhere else on the internet. Like, fuck, man, buyer beware, left, right, and center. Just use your own brain when I'm putting these things out. You should read some of the comments. It's hilarious. Guys are like, number 4, 7, and 8 are all fake. I'm like, okay, cool, man, sweet. Thank you. You've contributed a lot to this conversation.
Man, smart comments are the worst thing about Twitter, man. Like people trying to be like, I'm so smart, I figured this out. I had one, I did this really in-depth thing on Ethereum on my podcast with this dude. And it was honestly as detailed as I've seen in Ethereum, like overview and what's going on. And one guy is just like, Solana is not an alternative because it is not Turing complete. And I'm like, dude, go, just shut the fuck up.
You actually, I'll leave one last point on this.
About?
So I put so many shit posts now, like I shit post 2-3 times a day, but like the nature of my shit post is this. I want to put 80% like factual information and like people get ahas. And then last 20% is just a kicker, total shit post. Like perfect example is one about Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft. He just got named chairman. So he's been CEO for 7 years. Yesterday, which at the time of this recording would have been a week ago, he was named the chairman of Microsoft. And I just wrote, breaking news, Satya Nadella is now the chairman of Microsoft. Since he took over the company in 2014, they've added 1.6 trillion to the market cap, yet he himself is only worth $800 million. Then I put the old shitpost kicker lesson, you don't get rich being an employee. Yeah. And sure enough in the comments, what do you mean he's not rich? 800 million is a lot of money. And I'm just like, dude, this is what I've done now with these comments that completely missed the joke. I want the commenter to know I read their comment, but I'm going to hit like and just not reply to it. I'm going to hit like, so they're going to see that I saw it. I want them to know that I saw it, but I'm just not going to address it. Like I can no longer address these comments. I can't tell people now, hey, it's a joke. It's like, if you don't get it, like there's no reason for me to explain to you. But anyways, man, that's, I think we have one more question.
I thought we got, if you got 1 minute. The last one is there was one question which probably we'll get to next week, which is smart contracts impact on society explained in memes. I think we need more than 2 minutes for that. But the last one was from Nikhil, and Nikhil's the guy who wrote the thing in Spotify, my very actionable piece in Spotify. So he said, for Jack, why go to Substack when you're averse to platforms? Because you're using Substack as your email newsletter provider, right?
Yeah. Substack is, I actually built off Substack for a second. So you need a platform to distribute emails. Like unless somebody else knows how you can send an email without using a piece of software, like there is a dependency on a platform somewhere. Initially I built ConvertKit and Stripe, and then was collecting through Stripe, and I'd set up a bunch of integrations and then pass that through to ConvertKit and get people to, confirm their email and all that kind of stuff. Substack, already have a list, already have distribution. Substack lets you export your emails, so you can take the whole list, download it as a CSV whenever you want. So there's not an insane amount of risk there. And they have an interface for collection, for displaying the difference in benefits between paid users, free users. You can send previews of paid posts to some users and previews of paid posts to your full list, and then you can segment by paid. Their analytics.
It's like designed specifically for this use case, right? Like,
it's just that much more compelling, and like the built-in distribution of converting a free newsletter that has 15,000 subscribers to a paid newsletter is, you're basically starting again for no reason if you don't do that. So I'm like sensitive to platform risk to some extent, but email's a little different. I think. I hope that I'm not writing anything controversial enough that I would be considered for getting booted off Substack, but time will tell.
But I think the
also,
question.
hold on. I just want to say, Jack. So I think the big TLDR takeaway is here. You get to still own your list.
Yeah. You could download the list whenever you want.
So the platform risk then that Nikhil's referring to, there actually isn't a ton of platform risk from your.
Yeah, I think his question. I don't know if this is what you meant, but I think he was maybe talking about the cut that they take, which is like 10%. Is it 10%? I think of paid subscription revenue, and I'm assuming that's what he means, but he didn't actually mention that. But normally when people criticize Substack, they're normally saying, why are you on Substack when you could pay a lot less elsewhere? And I guess that's a different story.
Because your conversion rate on Substack is probably twice what it would be on some like hacked together site of your own. And it's just like you don't get indexed on the Substack homepage. Like, it's a really interesting debate because you can argue what percentage they deserve for that. But it's kind of like if you have escape velocity, like if your email is growing, then is 10% really going to make a difference to you? Like, it's not. It's really, internet businesses are so strange, man. It's like you either like absolutely smash it out of the park or you just struggle forever. It's a really interesting.
I like how you put that. You either smash out of the park or you struggle forever. Yeah,
because you literally could just be grinding away for this.
Like working for one subscription a week and paying 10%. It's like, if you weren't paying the 10%, what difference is the outcome really?
Yeah.
Well, the one thing I'll say is I've asked a few people who are quite big on Substack, like Lenny, Pomp, Polina, they're all some of the big Substackers, and they've all said we gain enough from it that it warrants the cost. We like Substack, they help us out, they feature us, whatever. They like the team, they like what they're building. And the final part, which I think is key, is you have the option. If you get to a point where you're spending $100,000 a month on subscriptions, paying it out to them, you could make that decision and say, now I'm going to take that list and take it elsewhere. So,
but guess what? You're not going to get 90% conversion when you move your list. Nobody is. So like, it's a really
Wait, what do you mean? If you move your list, you basically have to re-ask people to sign up to this new thing?
Yeah, you'd have to go and capture payment elsewhere, right? So say
so there's a bit of platform risk.
If you're making $1 million a month,
I think you get the Stripe side. I think I've heard that. But we'd have to verify. But yeah, I think there's a way for you to not have to get them to put in their credit card details again and everything like that.
Okay. All right. If that's the case, then.
But I could be wrong on that. But anyway, either way, it sounds like you like it so far and you're willing to pay 10% when it's benefiting you, which is, I think, a fair point of view.
All right. Beautiful, man. You guys have any closing thoughts or just enjoy the old weekend?
Man, that was
out there.
Be careful out there. We talked about a lot of good stuff. There's a lot of interesting stuff going on. Yeah, man. Media.
I got the Bored Ape spreadsheet up next week, boys.
All right. So if you made it all the way through, the next week we're going to talk about apparently how society will be affected by Bilal. What are we talking about? What's the question? How smart contracts
smart contracts. I mean, this could be a whole episode. Smart contracts impact on society.
Episode,
explained in memes. That's brilliant.
We talk about this for the rest of this podcast is life.
We should do like a live meme making session on one of the pods.
That would be fun.
A bonus episode.
Yeah, that'd be fun. And to release it to see if it hits.
Yeah.
All right, boys, that was fun. A lot of good stuff. If you like this, please keep telling your friends. That's the only way we get this out to more people. Write us a review. That'd be really helpful as well. And send us feedback on Twitter. I'm at B Zaidi, at Jack Butcher, and at Trung Phan. Just tweet us, let us know what you think. Until next time. See you next time. Bye-bye.